Welcome to a walk in the garden. I'm Liz Davey, and this series of garden shows is on Norfolk Community Television. We're going to start this series as a walk around my garden. I have a variety of gardens: an herb garden, a sunny perennial garden, a shade garden, and also a vegetable garden. Mother Nature hasn't been real kind this year. She's a little lazy, and she hasn't come around to give us some spring. But there are still some things you can do out in the garden at this season. As you'll notice, my perennial garden is pretty much like it was in the fall. I cleaned up most of my perennials by cutting them down. But if you have a nice day, you can get out there and start cutting off some of the others. This would have been a sedum, a tall sedum. It was nice for winter interest, but now it's time to cut it down. You can also do some raking, but I like to leave some of the leaves on while the weather is still below freezing every night to give it a little extra protection. It's too early to prune the roses. It's also too early to prune a number of other things. I like to wait until the roses are starting to show some growth, so you know what was killed over the winter and what is good growth. I'll take this rose down later. A good time to prune roses is about the time the Red Sox come back to Fenway. Not while they're still on the road, but when they come back to Fenway. Usually by then you can see the start of growth on the roses and it's time to prune them. One of the things I do in the winter is to put baskets filled with oak leaves over some of my tender perennials, chrysanthemums and lavenders particularly. Depends how many baskets I have. And then I put a rock on top. Those I'll leave on until the weather settles a little bit, and again it isn't cold. These plants can take temperatures down to 20 degrees, so it won't be long before I pull these and clean them off as I clean the rest of the garden bed. Most of the perennials got cut down last fall. I only leave a few here and there for winter interest. There are some signs of spring though. We have some tulips coming up and some daffodils and a few crocuses here and there. They're very small yet. However, I'm out with my deer spray. Norfolk has a great deer population, and if you planted any tulips last fall, be sure to watch for their arrival and get out there with some sort of deer spray. There are several on the market. I buy it as a concentrate that I dilute, but we have some nice tulips coming up, and it's really a shame if you come out to find your little tulips and find that they have been nipped off right at ground level. Now daffodils, on the other hand, are going to be safe. Deer don't like them, usually. Deer will eat just about anything in season. You'll see me with the deer spray more as the season goes on. The other thing you can do outside at this season, oops, here's another tulip. Guess we better spray it. Another thing you can do in the season is burn brush. This is my vegetable garden behind us. You'll notice an area of straw, which is a strawberry patch. I'll leave that straw mulch on and then rake it aside and kind of move it aside as my strawberries start their growth. I'll also leave some of the mulch on my raspberries. They can be pruned about any time. I'll be taking off the growth that produced the berries last year. I've also started a brush pile. We need to burn this brush. If you are going to burn brush this season, you have until May 1st, and in Norfolk it does require a burning permit. Where do you get one? Down at the fire department. They used to be able to get one online. You can't do that any longer. You have to visit the fire department and pick up your permit. Then the day you wish to burn, you call the fire department for permission for that day. That way they can keep track of whether it's too windy, and they know where fires are in case any get out of hand. The other thing you can do this season is a little pruning. And as we work our way back to the house in this cold weather, we'll do a little preliminary pruning. Again, a lot of the shrubs that haven't started to grow, like hydrangeas, I wouldn't prune just yet. Wait and see what growth is left, and when it starts to grow, then do the pruning. However, at any time you can take water sprouts off of things like crab apples. These come off pretty easy when they're young. These happen to be where I can reach them really well. Another thing that I like are these plastic trugs. They're really handy to have. They pick up trash, they carry your garden tools. I have several of them and they're very useful. They're light in weight, so you aren't spending all your time carrying something to hold other things. Now it's time to go inside and start some seeds. Okay, we've come inside now. There are things you can do inside while it's still too chilly to work outside and finish up with your spring cleanups. One of the main things to do is to start some seeds. Seed starting is a lot of fun to do, watching things grow. Sometimes it works, sometimes it doesn't. But I like to start a number of seeds. I do have the luxury of a sunroom. I also have some grow lights, which are readily available. First of all, you need to decide what you're going to start your seeds in. You can start seeds in just about anything. You can use things you got plants in last year from the nursery. If you do that, though, be sure to wash them carefully and then give them a little soak in a 10% bleach solution. Measure it out so that it's a 10% solution. You don't want too much or you'll kill your plants. You want enough to kill any bacteria. 10% is the right amount. You can use peat pots. They come in a variety of sizes, and you can plant those right in the ground. If you loosen the edges, it will be above the ground. You can use an egg carton with eggshells in it. You can grow in eggshells. Be sure to poke a hole in the bottom with a pair of scissors or a pin. You need to have some drainage, and you'll also need to put a tray of some sort underneath this egg carton. And I'd probably cut the top off. I might use something like this for things that I start later in the season, fast growers, like marigolds, that I just want to get a little bit of a start before I plant them in the garden. Marigolds will germinate in less than a week. But for things that take a long time, like a tomato, you really can't get enough soil in here to last until the plant reaches a good size for transplanting. You can also use things like this carton that clementines came in. Again, you'd need a tray under it, but it does have some nice holes. And there's a piece of paper in this one that'll hold your soil in and keep it from going out. I might use something like this to start some summer bulbs, and we'll probably do that in a couple of weeks. There are many commercial systems available. A lot of them have a waterproof bottom reservoir, and they have a cell unit on top that you fill with soil, and in between they have a supporting structure that holds up some sort of absorbent material. And this is used for starting a little larger plants. I particularly like this type, which is a foam type. It's reusable, very reusable. It comes with a dome top to keep the humidity in. It has a piece of absorbent material. This is the structure and the frame. You see, I had it put together for storage. In order to use this, we'd put some water in it. Soak the piece of cloth that we're using, this absorbent material. It's almost like a felt. We'll put that over the top of the support. You'll notice that the edges hang down. That's really important because you're going to keep the reservoir filled with water. You don't have to water the plants at all. You just water, there's a little area that's open down here that you can water throughout the plant's growing cycle. Then we put this on top. At this point, we're ready to add the soil. Seed starting mix. It's best if you don't use that you dig from outside. It isn't sterile, and it does carry a lot of weed seeds with it and other bacteria that can ruin your seedlings. You can make your own using a product called vermiculite and peat moss. You can mix those together. The idea is you want a soil or a medium that will drain well and still hold the moisture. It seems like kind of a oxymoron to drain well and hold moisture, but it will. Vermiculite is a clay product. It's actually a natural organic product, and it was first discovered in Massachusetts, believe it or not, and it's used for a lot of things, including plants. This is not the kind that's used for insulating your house. It's specifically for organic gardening. It can be used in addition to this, but also if you're filling containers outside and you have compost, you can add it to the compost to lighten it up. And that will help your plants by not having a soggy media. We're going to fill the cells of this planting box. You'll notice the planting box is a little worn down on the sides. These last a long time. I've had some of these planting boxes probably 8 or 10 years. Again, when I'm finished with them for the season, I wash them well. Old toothbrush works really well. And then I do that rinse in a 10% bleach solution and let them dry well before storing them away. And if you do take care of them, they tend to last quite a long time. At any rate, this is basically how you fill it up. And you want to put in enough soil that comes almost to the top. Remember, this is going to have to support the plant while it's growing. Incidentally, this soil that I'm using happens to be an organic seed starting mix. And it's formulated for starting organic seeds. It does contain some vermiculite or perlite, which is another product. And what I've done is, before yesterday, I wet this. And you need to wet it in advance. You want it wet, but not so you can wring out water. Just so it's nice and damp. You're going to be watering all these plants from the bottom as they grow. So you want it damp. If you get it too moist, you'll have to add more soil. But this basically is how we would fill this unit. And I have one over here that I've already filled, and I'm ready to plant some tomatoes. They're a common thing for people to start. You can start all kinds of things, all sorts of flowers and vegetables. I've already started a number of seedlings, and I'll be starting more in the next couple weeks, at which point I'll just help them grow and wait along. I'm going to start 6 different kinds of tomatoes. The advantage to starting your own seeds is that you can get a variety by buying a variety of seeds. And what I've done is I've numbered my packages. That way, I'll know what the plants are when they come up. By putting 6 different plants in here, I would have trouble identifying them if I didn't do some sort of labeling. So I'll start with number 1. And depending on the size of the seed, many of the flower seeds are very tiny, and you don't even need to cover them at all. But as far as the tomato seeds go, I'm going to put 1 or 2 in each of these compartments. And I'm going to do 4 of each, and then I will just put a little bit of soil over the seeds. Now, ultimately, we want 1 plant growing in each of these cells. The cells come, you saw the unit with 12 cells. This is a unit with 24 cells. There are other units that have 48 cells. They're all the same base. They are the same base size as these are. However, the 48s, the cells are quite a bit smaller. They'd be a little too small for a plant the size of a tomato. These will need to be transplanted before they go in the garden. The way our spring is going this year, who knows at what point we will get into be able to put them in the garden. There really is little sense in setting out tender plants like peppers and tomatoes until the soil has warmed to about 60 degrees. Again, I'm going in order 1, 2, 3. This is number 3. And again, just 1 or 2 I like to put in 2, have a little insurance. I will be cutting 1 out and keep the strongest plant after they're germinated and have maybe 2 true leaves. So it's pretty easy to do, to get them started, as long as you have all your things ready. And again, the tomatoes that I'm planting, I planted 2 main season regular tomatoes, the kind you'd slice and put on a sandwich. I've planted 2 paste tomatoes. And my plan for those is to make spaghetti sauce or pizza sauce to put in the, either in jars or in the freezer, so that I'll have that for next year. And then I have 2 smaller tomatoes, which I hope to dry some of. We'll eat a lot of them, the cherry tomatoes, because they're fun to just eat right out off the plant. But some of them also dry quite well. Seeds are pretty generally available at most of the garden centers, and I also place a number of seed orders. I particularly like a co-op in Maine, where I do get a number of seeds. And again, we're just about finished with this one. Now, we planted all these seeds, but how am I going to remember where they are in another month? I'm going to label the container. You have to watch where you label your container. If you label it down low, down in this area, and you decide you're not getting enough light and you turn the top around, which you can do, especially if you have it on a window area, then you're going to lose what you've planted. So I always label the one I planted in. I use a waterproof pen, and what I'm going to do is mark the back, say back, and then I'm going to do 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. So I know that I planted these. And of course the number's on the bag. I'll put that right here. And I know that it's from the back of this container, and this is the front. And that way I have it labeled. If I were planting one thing of all the same thing, or even 2, I would probably put the name and the variety on each one, which I've done on many of my containers. The next thing we do is cover it with the plastic dome, and we're going to put it up under the lights. My light unit was built for me probably about 40 years ago by my father. And he mailed it to me, and I had to assemble it. I've been using it ever since. We've changed bulbs a few times, just fluorescent bulbs, and I got some that are especially designed for growing. You'll notice I have my things labeled, and some of them don't have plastic domes, and the reason is the plants have germinated. Oops. We'll fill these with water. I generally fill them after I put them on the tray, so it's harder to carry without them. These have germinated. Pretty soon I will be taking 1 out of each one. I'll just pinch off the one that's weakest, and we'll have 1 in each cell. If they're far apart, I may take 1 and put it in empty cells. You always get some, especially with flowers, that do not germinate or that are a little later than others. You have to watch them fairly carefully so that you can see when they do germinate and take the cover off right away. If you don't take it off, the moisture will kill the plants with damping off. Again, using the pre-made soils for starting plants, it helps eliminate the damping off. The peat moss will also do that, and many people that use heavier soils will sprinkle a little peat moss on top to help with the damping off. But again, some of these are numbered with letters. This says peppers. I do need to write tomatoes on there so I know they're tomatoes, although I can identify the tomatoes pretty easily when they come up because they're pretty distinctive. So we'll keep an eye on those, and in about a week and a half, we'll have little tomato plants. The other thing you can do inside is get your house plants ready to go outside. These are cuttings that I took last fall. And what I did is I took a bit of some of the scented geraniums and a few special leaf geraniums. This one will actually have rather bright orange and green leaves once it's out in the sun. And I brought them in, I put them, potted them, used some potting hormone on them. And what I've been doing is pinching these to induce branching. And by pinching, I mean taking out the little centerpiece as a plant grows. It has a little center spot in the middle as it forms a new leaf. And if you pinch just that part out, it will force the plant into making branches. Here's one that was pinched, and you can see the new branches growing. This one I can pull just this little growing tip, and then it will branch so that we get a little healthier branching plant as we go along instead of just the simple part that was there. It's important to keep your cuttings watered. It's sometimes, especially when we are outside raking and starting cleaning up outside with the brush pickup and everything, it's easy to forget the houseplants that are inside. You can also step up the fertilizer a little bit come spring, and they will start to grow quite rapidly when they're starting to get more light. Now, before these can go outside, we'll have to acclimate them, and these can't go out. They're very tender. They won't be able to go out until probably the 1st of June. But in May, I will move them. I have a small greenhouse area that is not insulated, hence it gets cold at night. But if we're not getting a frost at night, I can put these out, especially during the day, and start acclimating them to the temperature. We'll do the same thing with the seedlings as they go along, and then we'll have a spot to do that. Again, fertilize them about weekly, about half-strength fertilizer. One of the things is to keep it light, and they'll start to grow. You'll notice growth on other plants. You'll have some that you want to put outside, maybe that need to be transplanted. Another inside job while we watch it snow yet again, and get things ready to go. The other thing with gardening is patience, and you need to cultivate a lot of patience in order to be a gardener. Nothing ever always works out quite the same. This year, as we go through this series, you'll see both the problems and hopefully some successes. But for now, what I'm going to do is sit down, take those tomato plant seedlings, and write them in a journal. I try to keep a journal of my gardening, and I write in what I've planted and the date I planted it and the varieties, and sometimes I often put what date it germinated or when I found the seedlings. I also keep track of things like snowstorms in the spring, not every one, but whether the temperature is cold or hot. I can look back through a number of years. In the back pockets, I keep orders I've made, garden vegetable plans. If I want to look back and see when I put a plant in, I can usually find the order. It's not necessarily neat, but I mark when I see the first crocus, the first snowdrops. You'll find in 2012, my yard cleanup was pretty much complete about now or a little before now. And I was already thinking about planting outside. This year, that's not going to happen. It's just a little different. We have had bluebirds at the feeder, though, and that's a good sign. And again, I marked that some crocuses were up and in bloom in back. But I'll mark my tomatoes, and then I'll know what 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5 stand for when they start to come up. Last but not least, it's a good time when you're waiting for the weather to go through garden magazines, seed catalogs. If you get on one list, you'll be on lots of lists, and you'll be able to enjoy lots of seed catalogs, place some orders, see what you might like to grow, and always enjoy just looking at the catalogs, looking at your records from past years. Enjoy a cup of tea. Use up some of the things that are in your freezer and your canned goods from last year. I made some blueberry muffins using some blueberries that I grew last year. I also supplemented that with those I picked locally. And I also put in some lavender. I like to add a twist to some of my baked goods. I grow lavender, and I do harvest some of it for culinary use. So the blueberry muffins include some lavender along with the blueberries. Hopefully the next time we meet, spring will have sprung, and we will take another walk in the garden. I'm Liz Davey, and this is a Walk in the Garden for NCTV.